What's going on, everyone? And welcome back to the channel. Tonight we have 5 stories, all submitted by real people, all involving nights out that turned into something no one saw coming. Whether it was a bar, a parking garage, a concert, or just the late-night drive home, every single one of these people thought they were just going to have a normal evening. They were wrong. Get comfortable, turn the lights down. Let's get into it. Story 1. The Man in the Booth. This happened to a guy named Derek about 3 years ago. He was in his late 20s at the time, living in Columbus, Ohio. He worked a dead-end office job during the week, and on Friday nights, his coworker Nate would usually hit up a sports bar called Callahan's on the east side of town. It was a regular routine. Nothing exciting, nothing dangerous, just 2 guys unwinding after a long week. On this particular Friday, Nate bailed last minute. Something came up with his kid. Derek didn't feel like going home to an empty apartment, so he went alone. He grabbed a booth near the back, ordered a beer and some wings, and put on the game on one of the TVs above the bar. The place was maybe half full, loud enough to feel comfortable, quiet enough that you could still have a conversation. Derek was fine being by himself. He'd done it before. About 40 minutes in, he noticed a man sitting in the booth directly across from his. Not across the room, directly across. Booths ran down both walls with an aisle in between. This man was facing Derek's direction, but he wasn't watching the game. He was just sitting there, staring. No drink in front of him, no food, no phone. Derek looked away, figured the guy was just zoned out or drunk. But a few minutes later, he glanced back, and the man's eyes were still fixed on him. Not on the game above him, not on the bar, on Derek specifically. Derek flagged down the waitress and quietly mentioned it. She gave the booth a quick look and said she hadn't seen the man order anything. She said she'd keep an eye on it. Derek went back to watching the game, but he couldn't relax. Every couple of minutes he'd check, and every time the man was still there, still watching. No expression on his face, just still. After about an hour, Derek decided to call it a night. He paid his tab, put on his jacket, and stood up. When he looked over, the man stood up too, exact same moment, like he was mirroring him. Derek's stomach dropped. He walked toward the front exit. He glanced over his shoulder twice, and both times the man was following him. Not rushing, just walking, calmly, deliberately, keeping pace. He pushed through the front door into the parking lot and picked up his pace. His car was near the back, which suddenly felt very far away. He could hear footsteps behind him on the asphalt. He didn't look back. He got his keys out, unlocked his car, jumped in, and locked the doors immediately. He sat there, heart slamming in his chest, and looked in his rearview mirror. The man was standing at the edge of the parking lot entrance, not walking anymore, just standing there, watching Derek's car, arms at his sides. Derek drove out of the lot, and as his headlights swept across the man's face, he finally got a clear look at him. He looked completely blank, not angry, not crazy-eyed, just empty, like the lights were on and nobody was home. Derek told Nate about it the next day. Nate laughed it off, said the guy was probably just weird. But Derek went back to that bar 2 weeks later and mentioned it to the bartender. The bartender's expression changed. He told Derek that 2 months earlier, a woman had reported being followed home from that same bar. She'd said a man had watched her from a booth across from hers for almost an hour before following her outside. She'd managed to get away, but she filed a report. The police had never identified anyone. Derek never went back to Callahan's.
Kelsey was 24 years old and just moved to Chicago for a new job. She didn't know the city well yet, but she was figuring it out. Her new work friends invited her out on a Saturday night, bar crawl through Wicker Park, nothing too crazy. She had a good time, maybe a drink or 2 more than she intended, and by midnight she was ready to head home. She lived on the Red Line, about 6 stops south. She'd ridden the train before, but always earlier in the evening. This was the first time she was catching it past midnight. The station was quiet when she got down to the platform. A few scattered people, a couple leaning against the wall, a guy in a security jacket scrolling through his phone, an older woman with grocery bags sitting on a bench. Normal enough. Kelsey stood near the yellow platform edge line and waited. The board said the next train was 4 minutes out. That's when she noticed him. He was standing about 30 feet down the platform, facing her direction. Medium height, dark hoodie, jeans. What caught her attention was that he wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't looking at the track. He was looking at her. And when she made eye contact, he didn't look away. He held it. Kelsey looked down at her phone and tried to seem busy. When she glanced back up 30 seconds later, he had moved closer, maybe 10 feet closer. He hadn't done it in a way she could call out. He'd just repositioned, casual, like he was just shifting where he stood. She moved toward the couple leaning against the wall and stood near them, not right next to them, just close enough that she wasn't isolated. The train pulled in. She got in through the door near the middle of the car. She watched through the glass as the man got in through the far end of the same car. He sat down. She watched him in the reflection of the dark window across from her. He was looking at her again. Kelsey's stop was the 6th one. She'd planned to get off there and walk 3 blocks to her apartment. But as the train pulled into her stop, she didn't move. She let the doors open and close. She stayed on. The man didn't get off either. She rode 2 more stops, then got off and immediately walked up to a group of people coming down the stairs. She fell in beside them and walked to the street. She pulled out her phone and called a rideshare. While she waited, she stood in the lit entrance of a convenience store. The man from the train never appeared on the street above. But when she got home and checked her phone, she had a notification from her location-sharing app. It was a glitch. She'd accidentally shared her location to a public link through the app earlier that evening. The link had been accessed 3 times in the past hour. All 3 times were from an unknown device. She changed every setting on every app she had that night. She never figured out who had accessed it. She still doesn't know how they got the link.
This one was sent in by a guy named Theo. He was 19 at the time, living in Nashville, and he'd gone to a general admission concert at a mid-sized venue downtown. He went with 2 friends, but they got separated in the crowd early on, and he didn't find them again until after the show. The venue emptied out slowly. Theo hung around inside for a while, waiting for the crowd to thin, then sent his friends a text saying he'd meet them at the car. The parking garage was a couple of blocks away, one of those older concrete structures with flickering fluorescent lights and no attendant after 10. He walked over alone. The streets were still semi-busy from the post-concert crowd, but by the time he reached the garage entrance and took the stairwell up to level 3, it was just him and the hum of the lights. He found his friend's car. They'd driven, and leaned against it. He texted them. They said they were coming. 5 minutes. That's when he heard the door to the stairwell open. A man walked out onto the level. He looked around, and then walked toward Theo's row. Theo figured he was heading to his own car, so he didn't think much of it. But then the man slowed down and stopped, not at a car, just in the middle of the row, about 20 feet from where Theo was standing. Theo looked at him. The man was staring at him. "You need something?" Theo said. No answer. "Hey, you all right?" The man tilted his head slightly. Still nothing. Theo's adrenaline kicked in. He pushed off the car and put some distance between himself and the man, moving toward the open edge of the garage where the concrete barrier was. At least out there, someone on the street might see him. The man followed. He didn't rush. He just walked, steady and quiet, keeping that same 20-foot gap. Theo called his friend directly. "Get up here right now. Level 3. There's a guy following me." His friend told him to stay on the line. Theo kept moving slowly around the row, never turning his back fully. The man stopped when Theo stopped, moved when Theo moved. 2 minutes later,
Theo heard the stairwell door bang open again, and his two friends came jogging out. The man looked at them, then looked at Theo one more time. Then he walked to the stairwell, pushed through the door, and was gone. The three of them left immediately. On the drive home, they pulled up the garage's location on a local crime map app, just out of curiosity. There had been a robbery at that same garage 4 weeks ago. The suspect had never been caught. The description in the report was a man in his 30s, medium height, dark clothing. They reported what happened. The police said there was not much they could do. Theo doesn't go to parking garages alone anymore. Ever.
Story 4. The Ride Home. Cassie was 26, living in Atlanta, and she'd been out with her coworkers celebrating a promotion. It had been a good night, the kind that sneaks up on you. What was supposed to be 1 drink after dinner turned into 3, and a quick toast turned into almost 2 hours at a rooftop bar in Midtown with the city lights spread out below them. She didn't mind. She'd earned it. New title, new salary, new chapter. By 11 o'clock, she was feeling warm and loose, and more relaxed than she'd been in months. When the group started breaking up, she hugged her coworkers goodbye and stepped down to the sidewalk to pull up the rideshare app. The night air was thick and humid the way Atlanta gets in the summer. She fanned herself with her hand and waited for a match. It came within 2 minutes. The driver's name on the app was Roy. 4.8 stars, 312 trips. That was solid. Not just someone who'd done a handful of rides. This was someone who did it regularly. She checked the car details. A gray Honda Accord, license plate starting with RBT. She watched the little car icon move toward her on the map and felt fine about it. When the car pulled up, she confirmed the plate before she even opened the door. Matched. She climbed in the back seat and settled in. Roy didn't say anything beyond a quick, "Cassie?" She said yes, and they pulled into traffic. He was maybe in his mid-40s, baseball cap, dark jacket, one of those cheap phone mounts stuck to the dashboard. The car smelled like pine air freshener. Nothing about it was unusual. Nothing set off any alarms. She put her seatbelt on and opened her phone to check some messages while the city slid past the windows. For the first several minutes, the route looked completely normal. She wasn't watching it closely, just glancing at it every now and then, the way you do when you know roughly where home is. The little blue arrow on her map pointed south, then slightly east, right direction. Then the car slowed. Not dramatically, just enough that she noticed. She looked up from her phone. They were on a street she didn't recognize, which wasn't unusual, but something felt slightly off. The businesses they'd been passing had thinned out. There were fewer streetlights. The foot traffic that had been visible on the main roads was gone entirely. She looked at her app. They were not on the suggested route. The blue line on her map was still pointing toward her apartment, but the little car icon had drifted 3 streets west of where it should have been. She checked the estimated arrival time. It had gone from 9 minutes to 14. Roy pulled up to a stop sign and sat there. Not briefly. He just sat there, engine idling, in a way that felt deliberate. There was no cross-traffic, no reason to wait. Cassie kept her voice even. "Everything okay up there?" "Yeah," Roy said. His voice was flat, not unfriendly exactly, just completely neutral, like a voice that wasn't trying to be anything at all. She looked at the back of Roy's head. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't adjusting anything. He was just sitting at that stop sign with both hands on the wheel. "Can you get back on Peachtree?" she asked, keeping her tone casual, like she was just making a suggestion, helpful passenger stuff. There was a pause that lasted just a half-second too long. "I know a faster way," he said. Something cold moved through her chest. Not panic, not yet, but her body registered it before her brain fully did. Her thumb found the door lock on the armrest and she pressed it quietly, making sure it was in the unlocked position. She gripped her phone in her other hand. She had her sister's contact already on screen without quite realizing she'd opened it. She made a decision in the next second. She wasn't going to beg or argue. She wasn't going to sound scared. She was going to be firm and make herself sound like someone who couldn't be fooled. "Actually," she said,
"I'd prefer you stick to the app route. I know this area pretty well." She had never been on this street in her life. Another pause. She watched the back of his neck. He didn't turn around. His hands stayed on the wheel. Then, slowly, he made a right turn. It brought them to a wider road, and within 30 seconds they were back on a street she recognized, a gas station on the corner she'd passed a dozen times. The blue route line snapped back into alignment with where they were. 14 minutes dropped back to 9. Cassie breathed through her nose and kept her face neutral. She did not look relieved. She didn't want him to see that she'd been scared. She just watched out the window and tracked every street name they passed for the rest of the ride. Roy didn't say another word, not one. He pulled up in front of her building, the app chimed that we'd arrived, and she was out of the car in under 5 seconds. She didn't say thank you. She didn't look back at him. She walked straight to her building door, got inside, and didn't stop moving until she was in her apartment with the deadbolt turned. She stood in her kitchen for a minute with her back against the counter, just breathing. Then she opened the app and gave him 2 stars, the lowest she felt she could give without it looking like she was overreacting, and filed a written report about the detour. She described the street, the stop sign, the exact amount of time he'd sat there. The rideshare support team sent her a form response within the hour, something about reviewing driver behavior and appreciating her feedback. Before she went to sleep, she took a screenshot of Roy's profile, his photo, his name, his rating, his vehicle information. She didn't know why she did it exactly. It just felt like the right thing to do, like some instinct telling her to make a record while she still could, before the trip history cycled out. She almost forgot about it entirely the next few weeks. Life moved on. The promotion kept her busy. She started taking the MARTA train more often and didn't think too hard about why. Then, 23 days later, she was eating lunch at her desk and scrolling through local news when she saw it. A short segment. A rideshare driver in the Atlanta metro area had been arrested. The story was still developing, but the headline said he'd been accused of locking a passenger inside his vehicle and driving her to a location outside the city. Cassie read the name in the article. Roy. She put down her fork. She opened her Photos app and found the screenshot she'd taken 3 weeks earlier. Same name, same vehicle description, same rating, 4.8 stars, like none of it had ever meant a thing. She sat there at her desk for a long time, not moving. She sent the screenshot to the detective contact listed at the bottom of the news article. She got a call back the same afternoon. They thanked her. They said it was useful. They didn't tell her much else. She still has the screenshot saved in 3 different places. She doesn't take rideshares alone after dark anymore. Not once. Not even for short trips. Not for any reason. And she thinks about that stop sign sometimes. The way Roy just sat there at an empty intersection with his hands on the wheel, waiting, not checking his phone, not saying anything, just waiting.
Story 5. Something in the parking lot. This last story comes from a woman named Portia. She was 31 when this happened, living outside of Indianapolis in one of those mid-sized suburbs where everything is strip malls and chain restaurants, and you feel completely safe because nothing ever really happens there. That feeling of safety, that's important to understand. It's the reason she almost didn't make it home that night. She'd been out with her younger sister, Renee, at a bar and grill called Brick House off the main commercial strip. It was a regular spot for them. They tried to do a dinner out every couple of weeks, just the 2 of them, to catch up without husbands and kids and the noise of regular life. They got a booth near the back, ordered burgers and loaded fries, split a pitcher of light beer, and talked for almost 3 hours. The kind of easy, unhurried conversation you can only have with someone you've known your whole life. By the time they settled the check, it was close to midnight. The restaurant was winding down. Half the tables empty, the bartender restocking glasses, the TV above the bar switched to local news on mute. Portia and Renee grabbed their jackets and headed to the vestibule near the side exit. This is where they made the small, completely ordinary decision that almost changed everything. Their cars were on opposite sides of the building. Renee had parked up front, close to the entrance. Portia had come in a little later and ended up in the side lot, maybe 60 or 70 feet around the corner of the building. Neither of them thought anything of it. They hugged, said they'd text each other when they got home, and pushed through their respective doors. Portia came out into the side parking lot and let the door swing shut behind her. It was quiet out there. The kind of quiet that settles into suburban commercial strips late at night. No traffic, no voices, just the low hum of HVAC units on the roof and distant road noise from the highway a half-mile away. The lot was lit, but not evenly. There were pole lights at the corners, but they left pockets of shadow between the parked cars in the middle rows. Portia noticed it the way you notice something without really registering it, a vague background awareness. She was already thinking about getting home, maybe watching something before bed. Her car was in the third row. She could see it from where she stood, a dark blue sedan parked between a pickup truck and a large white SUV. She started walking. She was maybe halfway across the lot when she heard something. She stopped. Not dramatically, not in a panic. She just paused the way you do when your brain catches something before the rest of you does. She stood still and listened with everything she had. And then she heard it again. It was a low sound, a slow, careful shuffling, like something shifting its weight very deliberately in a small space. It came from the dark strip between the white SUV and the pickup truck just ahead and to her right. The exact path she'd been about to walk through. Portia's heart rate spiked. She didn't move. She just stood in the middle of that lot, perfectly still, and listened with everything she had. And then she heard the breathing. That was the part she said she could never fully describe to people afterward. Not what she saw, not what happened, the breathing. Because it wasn't frantic or ragged, it was slow and controlled, the way someone breathes when they are actively trying to make no noise and not quite succeeding. Measured in, measured out, the breathing of someone who was waiting. Something locked into place inside her chest. Every instinct she had went from background noise to full volume in about half a second. She didn't scream. She didn't freeze. She took one step back toward the door she'd come through, and she said it loudly and clearly into the dark between those two vehicles. "I can hear you." The breathing stopped. The shuffling stopped. The lot went completely silent. She kept backing up slowly, watching that dark strip between the SUV and truck the whole time, measuring the distance between herself and the side exit door. 5 steps, 4, 3. She didn't turn her back. She didn't look away from the gap between the SUV and the truck for even a second. And then the hand appeared. Just the hand first, gripping the side mirror of the white SUV. Large hand, dark sleeve, curling around the mirror the way someone holds on to something for balance when they're crouching and starting to stand up. Portia stopped breathing entirely. The man unfolded himself out of the shadow between the two vehicles. He was tall, well over 6 feet, and he wore a dark jacket and dark pants and a dark knit cap pulled low. He stood at the edge of the gap and looked at her. Not a glance, not a sweep of the lot. He looked directly at her, like he'd known exactly where she was standing the whole time. She hit the door with her back and pushed through it and let it slam behind her. She crossed the vestibule in 3 steps and went straight past the host stand into the main floor of the restaurant. The bartender looked up, startled by whatever was on her face. She said as clearly and calmly as she could manage, "There's a man hiding in the parking lot on the side of your building. I need you to call the police right now." He did. No questions. He picked up the phone and called. Portia stepped away from the bar and called Renee. Her sister didn't understand what she was saying because she was speaking too fast. She slowed down. She said, "Don't go to your car yet. Come back inside right now. Come back inside." Renee came in through the front while they waited. The police arrived in under 5 minutes, 2 cruisers. Officers swept the parking lot with flashlights and then extended their search to the street and the adjacent properties. They found him 2 blocks away, sitting on a retaining wall outside a closed dry cleaner. He didn't run when they approached. He just watched them come.
When they searched him, they found zip ties in his jacket pocket, 3 of them bundled together. He was arrested. Portia found out more through a detective who called her a few days later. The man had prior incidents, nothing that had resulted in a conviction, but reports. Women followed in parking lots, women who'd noticed someone near their car and gotten spooked and left, not knowing how close they had actually come. Each time, nothing had happened because nothing had escalated to the point where it could be documented and charged. He'd been doing this, the detective said, for a while, getting more comfortable, getting bolder. The detective told her she had made every right call, stopping when she heard the sound, not continuing forward, not running because running can trigger a different response, backing up slowly, going inside, getting others involved immediately. He told her in plain and direct language that the outcome of that night would very likely have been different if she had just kept walking to her car like she planned to. Portia said afterward that the hardest thing to sit with wasn't the fear she had felt in that parking lot. It was the realization of how automatic it would have been to just keep walking. She'd walked through that kind of dark gap between cars 100 times in her life. She'd walked through it without a second thought. She would have done it again that night if she hadn't heard that sound, if the shuffling had been just a little quieter, if he had been just a little more patient. She said, "I don't feel like I did something smart. I feel like I got lucky that he made the noise." Most of us would have kept walking. Most of us never hear the sound altogether. 5 stories, 5 normal nights out that almost became something none of those people would ever recover from. Derek, Kelsey, Theo, Cassie, Portia. Regular people, regular evenings, and a moment that split everything into before and after. If you're heading out tonight, stay with your group, trust your gut, and never feel embarrassed about turning around and going back inside. Your instincts exist for a reason. Thanks for watching. If you've had something like this happen to you, drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Hit subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe out there.